Liesl, Jenny, and Julie. I'm sure you don't need extra introductions. You probably all know them. Why don't we go straight to the clips and we'll set them up. Julie, we're going to talk about series today and how to pitch your series ideas. And Julie, this series, Humans of New York, tell us about it.
Sure. So Humans of New York is a pretty well-known blog that Brandon Stanton started some years ago. Do most people here know what Humans of New York is? Okay, great. This will be really short. And then Brandon decided he wanted to do a series, and he really just went out with his cinematographer, Michael Crommett, who's incredibly talented, and they just walked the city, essentially, for years and collected an enormous amount of interviews, and then came and we met with them at Motto, which is our company, Motto Pictures, and started to talk about what it would be like to develop that into a series. And we can show the trailer for what became the series, and we'll talk a little bit more, I think, about that process.
It is. It's so beautifully shot, and it's amazing.
Yeah, he's a great DP, everyone. Michael Crommett.
Amazing.
Write his name down. So tell us a little bit about, they came into the office, you knew about the blog. What happened next?
Yeah, and it's kind of amazing. I was just thinking that every time I see this, I think, people will tell Brandon, they just open up, like he comes, he has that gift. You meet him and you're like, he's a dude. And then I'm like, how is that possible? Like, how did all of these people, but he has something that's innate, it's ephemeral, I don't know what it is. And I mean, I didn't tell him everything, but a lot of people really do. And it's, it's kind of amazing just looking at that, what he can bring out from people. And he really connects. And so there's this mass of material. So besides the kind of usual, like let's connect you with an editor and Brandon really wanted to be the creative force of the series as well. Where is this gonna go? Where should this go? Well, he, like none of us, I don't think, has 18 million followers on Facebook. So Facebook launching Facebook Watch at that time was very interested in having the series. But he also it was a big debate. What do? Do you try to find new audiences and go to Netflix or go to HBO? How do you really kind of work the parameters of where you can expand? And ultimately, that central audience who are incredibly devoted and really a very loving, like unlike a lot of other places where people congregate online, there's no nastiness. It's really supportive. It's kind of wonderful community that's come to be around Humans of New York. So the decision was to take that leap with Facebook Watch, which is a leap. You're doing something with a company that is completely revamping or changing or launching this new model. How are they going to do it? Are they going to be the right place? Are they going to know what they're doing? So it is always a little scary. It's always also kind of great because you can push what you want to do in a way that you probably couldn't with a place that's been churning out series for a long time. So that was the decision that we kind of really debated for a long time, and that was the decision that we made, and we went with Facebook Watch.
And did Facebook also finance the whole series, or what?
No, Brandon, the books are bestsellers, the Humans of New York books, and he used his own money to just, it was the two of them. He bought a lot of shoes, I guess, because they were walking around New York. He bought the equipment, and they just got this material. And Michael, it was just a two-man team for these years. So he had financed that himself. But then, Facebook ultimately came in, covered all of the additional costs, and basically paid Brandon back, essentially, for what he had spent.
Okay, you need honey. I'm going to get a tissue.
I'm going to ask a question of Julie for you
Yes.
while you get a glass of water or something. Just going to jump in. I'm so sorry, Cynthia. I had that last week. How did you guys know, what was the strategy with so much material and then needing to put together a pitch reel or think about how to approach networks or approach the buyers? What was the process, a succinct version of the process of the how should we pitch this? Or, how do we answer
Yeah.
that when you went through that early process?
I mean, I think that, Brandon just had some samples of material that he would show. He didn't create really a proper reel with it. And he kind of didn't need to, because you go on to Humans. It's very unusual in that way. Normally we do, spend endless time on getting the deck perfect and getting the sizzle to work just right. But in this case, he had this IP essentially that somebody was, that a lot of people wanted to buy into. So because of that, it was a lot easier in that way, just to say we have 1,200 interviews, we have, and then it was really a conversation of, how are you going to create this? Is it going to be theme-based? Is it going to be, you have all these interviews, and Brandon was he's a really interesting guy. He knew, he was only going to do the interviews that he thought were extraordinary, the people that he thought really popped. And when we originally, he didn't have an organizing principle for it, and when we decided on the themes, they were still very broad themes. So if it was parenting, it could be, parenting your animal. It could be parenting your child. It could be you being parented. There was all different interesting ways to go in and out, because it was so much this massive material, but it was incredibly well organized. That was the other thing that was just amazing to me, like how organized it was, so you could cross-reference subject. And so that was really, with Facebook, it was like, we want to do it thematically, but it's going to be loose, and we don't want to be tied to a specific time. We want it to be very organic. And they agreed to that, which was another reason that felt like the right place to go.
You okay, Cynthia?
let's
You want
talk
us to
about
be
Jenny.
conversant? We can just keep talking. I'm so sorry.
Can we still find it on Facebook, or?
Yes, you can. You can find it on Facebook Watch if you can find Facebook Watch. And you can also go through the portal of the Humans of New York page.
That's great. It's so beautiful, and look forward to watching it again. Are you going to do another series with them, or another series of season 2?
It's
For
also,
example?
I mean, it really kind of goes to what I was just saying about Brandon. It was like, he's like, I used my A material. I don't want to use B material. I'm like, but you have so many interviews, like the producers and us were like, use it. Who cares if it's B? Not really, but like to some degree, we were kind of pressing him, and he said, well, I'm not going to go out for another 4 years and do this. This was, I want to do something else. And he found a subject, and he's making a documentary about it. And he's a really interesting, smart guy.
Great. Are you working with them on this new piece?
Yeah, no, we've been
Okay.
like kind of advising.
Advising, good. Liesl, let's come to you. And you're at Endeavor now, and you're going to show us a clip from How to American. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting. I want to keep talking about Julie's thing, but I'm going to segue anyway. But the thing that I think would be interesting to talk about, we can come back to it, is just that the way that IP travels across platform, from Facebook to books to a series, right? I think that's a big piece of interest in the business that I have. And just to contextualize that, why it was mentioned that we have 10 films here, there's a couple different business models that Endeavor Content does, and then I'll jump to this. We continue to act as advisors to financiers and run a sales business that we always have when we were just still called WME and part of the WME ecosystem. But we've been spun out as a separate business unit, and now we have access to the capital of the financiers we advise, as well as some of our own capital to co-finance the development and production of series and feature documentaries in my area, as well as feature films and scripted series. So I run nonfiction for that group. So some films we sell that we're selling on behalf of other investors, and some films or projects, in this case a series, we will assess how to fund and work with the creatives. And we're really there to empower creative producers and writers and thinkers to help them find the best financial model for getting their content and stories told. In the case of this, a client of the WME side of the business, who's a director, Keith Davidson, who made Ivory Game and has the original, the first episode of Remastered on Netflix on Bob Marley, and has done a number of, as Oscar-nominated filmmaker, said he really wanted to get back to something comedic, and he and I started developing a certain number of ideas just sort of from the ether. I was driving home and listening to NPR, and I heard Jimmy O. Yang, who's the talent in this piece, who you may know from Silicon Valley. He plays Jin Yang on Silicon Valley and was in Crazy Rich Asians. And he's an immigrant, and he came to the U.S. when he was 13 years old from Hong Kong. And he had a very formative early teen time, a very interesting take on wanting very much to be an American at that time. And then later in his life and career, now that he's become a stand-up comedian, he sort of became more of his Chinese or Hong Konger self and really wanted to explore immigrant communities with the unique comedic lens that he had. And so my colleague, Sally Rosen, who's in the audience, who runs creative for Endeavor Content for the nonfiction side, and I started working with he and Keith to sort of develop a structure to go out and build a pitch reel for. And we're in the process of pitching that now, and we have offers, I'm happy to say. But I really wanted to share it with you, and I think it speaks for itself. But enjoy it, and then we'll talk more.
Great. Terrific.
Yeah.
Tell us about, so you've developed this, you've pitched it.
Yeah. So we actually have a longer version of this reel that we put together for the pitch purposes. And Jimmy had written a book about his experience of coming to this country, which was, you can see from the Colbert interview, called How to American. That book is also being made into a scripted series. It's under option right now from at a producer who's got a deal at FX. So we're very hopeful about that. And he really wanted to take a similar angle of his own experience and kind of go into the pockets where immigrants like him, who were trying to succeed in different creative fields, and kind of explore their communities, and like him with his father, the sort of traditional upbringing they may or may not have had within their culture, and then kind of create a lens through comedy of telling that story rather than through like a talking head mechanism, because he can use the stage and do improv and write comedy sketch and things like that. His father will be part of the series as well, as sort of that alternative part of the culture voice. And it's really to sort of, his goal is to kind of create sameness among people of different backgrounds in the United States. And he and Keith have just done an incredible job putting together materials. The pitch that we took to network was 8 minutes, right, Sally? Maybe 8 minutes long, as well as a deck on the type of individuals that they might profile. The singers that you would have had an opportunity to see more of, from if we showed the long reel, but we would have probably all fallen asleep, and there's like not that much time. But we're a music duo called Mitre, who had great success in Mexico as sort of more of a mariachi traditional music group. And they came to LA to sort of make it in America, and they were trying to make kind of mariachi pop and be more pop artists. So, he worked with people that he knows from the hip hop community, and they're gonna now produce some songs together. And so it's really that mashup of our culture in this sort of multicultural moment. And we got a lot of receptivity at a lot of the networks. We're sort of in talks with a couple key ones right now. And it's an interesting thing to come at that time to sort of in a live environment, share with an audience. So you're the only ones outside of the handful of networks and people on our company that have seen this, and on Jimmy's team. But, I think it's interesting on process to sort of realize what the big lens for us was, looking at what's on air on a lot of networks. The news factor, you have just, refugees and like different cultures are bad, and so much separation of our different backgrounds, and isolation and profiling of different backgrounds. And what Jimmy really wanted to do, and we wanted to support him, was sort of use his unique voice to sort of explore the through lines of similarity and community. And it was very interesting how all the networks were so receptive to that. As something that wasn't as much on air. There's a few comedy hybrid shows that are kind of starting to pop up out there, and a lot of hybrid shows in the food space. And so we sort of saw that trend. And I think, when we saw a distinguishing factor for the series, that there wasn't really anything else like it on television. But we saw similar attempts in formats in different content areas like food. And so we felt that was a real reason to take it out and pitch. So to the answer of the question, should you pitch it? We said yes.
So glad you did. It looks fantastic. When is it? When do you go into production?
That's all being worked out now. So yeah, it'll probably take us into the beginning of next year to really figure out the timing of that. And then we are probably going to go through a aggressive piloting process. And then, so it may be, deep into next year that you start hearing more about it. And it'll probably change the title, because the book itself, of his experience being a young person coming to the U.S., is going to be made into a scripted series. And so we now have the same title as a scripted series. So one of us will win, and it'll probably be the scripted series, is my bet. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I can't wait for it to get so timely. Yes, exactly. Well, let's pop to Jenny and let's look at you. So you co-directed and produced The Fourth Estate, which is on Showtime. And do you want to talk to us a little bit about that? And let's look at a clip.
Sure. The Fourth Estate is the brainchild of Liz Garbus, who is brought the idea to the New York Times. The series takes a look at the New York Times and their coverage of Trump during the first year of his presidency. So it goes from Inauguration Day to the State of the Union. Actually, we went on a little bit because we had a surprise ending. It's still going on, by the way. Trump is still president.
No way. Is that true?
Yes, it's true. We
A
started
series where we take him out.
exactly. This was a film was supposed to be a feature film for about 13 seconds, and then as soon as we started talking to reporters and editors inside the Times, we realized this is definitely bigger than just a 90-minute film. So for Liz and for myself, it was the first major series we had ever done. I had done a film about the Grateful Dead, which was also a 6-hour series, but that also started as a feature film and segued into a series as we were making it. This started as a series basically right away. So that was a different process for both of us and a huge learning curve. But we also, it was great. I mean, I'm just sort of speaking from going from feature to series and also realizing right away, once you see how much material you have and could potentially have, how you can make that into a series. So what can I say? The trailer is really shows you the scope of the series. It's 4.5 hours. We were shooting for a year, a little bit longer, and each episode takes a 3-month period of time during the first year of the presidency. That was the only way we could actually organize it because it was such a massive amount of material. There was probably 600 hours of footage between many locations.
So should we look at the clip?
Yeah, we can look at the clip.
So timely.
Yeah, I have
Had a hard time
PTSD
not running
just
for the
from
exit. Sorry,
watching
everyone.
that. I know. I can talk a little bit about the pitch process because
Yeah, especially as you thought this might be a one-off at first and
so we
segued into a...
Right. So when we started, Liz had gone to the Times to ask for permission to film. So that happened in about December. We sort of didn't have an answer yet, but Inauguration Day was coming up, and we said to the Times, could we just come in and film Inauguration Day? Because if you do go forward, we just want to have that in the can. So we filmed. Liz was in DC, I was in New York, and then we filmed maybe 1 or 2 more days just because once we got in the building, it was like, we're going to come next week, we're just going to keep coming. And we cut together probably like a 4-minute version. It's very similar actually to this, but it was just from those 4 days of shooting. And it was really primarily to show access. And that's when I remember it, it's really, we are inside the building, we are with these people, and there are many of them, and the stories are happening and they're unfolding. We have no idea how this is going to turn out. We can't promise you that this is what the scope of the story is, but what we can tell you is that we are close. And really, that's essentially what the pitch, or what the reel showed, and then we wrote a pitch of how important the Fourth Estate is, and what the role of the press is, and Trump's very contentious relationship with the New York Times. And so it was maybe like a 2 or 3 page pitch and a 3-minute reel, using very similar material, just lots of shots of all the various people you were going to actually meet. And that went out to about maybe 4 or 5 different distributors. And in the end, Showtime came back with the most resources. Also, they came back agreeing to, some people kind of wanted to do like a 2-hour thing about the New York Times and maybe 2 hours about another organization. I mean, Showtime actually came back saying, yes, you can stick with just the New York Times, and yes, it can be for 4.5 hours, and gave us enough resources, so we went with Showtime, and it was a great pairing. They were supportive 100% of the way, but it just thinking through, should I pitch it? We actually didn't know what the story was going to be. I mean, it was really an access story for us in the very beginning, and so if you've got that, yes, you should pitch it.
Great. Well, let's launch into some questions and some dialogue about what makes a series. What makes a series good? There's so many, like documentary. There's so many different kinds of definitions. There's connotations. I mean, the series with Jimmy is like, there can be one on, in one alone, stand one-offs, and as much
Episodic, yeah. Each
what keeps you
episode is
coming
episodic.
back? What keeps you coming back week to week, or does a series need to be actually a serial? Or Liesl?
I think, we speak a lot to the buyers about these projects, multiple projects, some that, we're aligned with our non-scripted group or are pitching them all the time and get that intel all the time. And I think, there's been a lot of changes in the buying space, because I think series used to be, 13, 26 episodes, regardless of length. And now obviously we have, 4 hours. I think like this looks amazing, and I can totally understand why 4 hours makes sense like that. We have Defiant ones, which is 4 hours. I think, I understand that some of the platforms have noticed when they had more than 8 hours of something that maybe the viewership would drop off more, so they're trying to condense it over a period of time. But you have things that are either episodic, where each episode, like, Ugly Delicious, or, there's one about the most extraordinary homes. You kind of go to a different place each time, so you can kind of watch an episode in isolation. Or you have ones where the story arc takes place just over many more hours than your typical 3-act structure, 45-minute per act, half an hour per act, 2-hour feature doc. And so I think we see a lot of both, and it's really about, like, if you have, I think that people like with podcasts and with how much information is out there kind of coming at us in small bites, the opportunity to deep dive and binge and go deeper into the story. We've, across many platforms have established that the appetite is there. Mm-hmm. And so it's really, in my view, sort of about finding the right sort of water seeking its own level stasis of each story. Where Humans of New York, they could have done themes, but they could have done 3 humans an episode. I mean, there's so many different ways you can slice and dice that, and how you want to have people. I imagine you thought a lot about coming back to it, and when you made that format decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was we tried different things, and this was the one that felt right. Because you could include so many more interesting stories around that kind of loose organizing principle. But I mean, I agree. And for us, when we're looking to do a series, a lot of times now, because series are hot, people will come with like, oh, I have this film, but I think it can be a series. And I'm sure, that's a common experience. And you really have to think, why? Why should this be? Because I see a lot of series that I'm like, why? You would have been a great feature, and I'm bored, and it's 3 hours in, or 2 hours in. And I think we probably all have that experience sometimes. So it really has to, you said, come with the stasis. What did you say?
Yeah, it's like water seeking its
Yeah.
level. It's
Yeah,
like
exactly.
stasis. It hits it finds itself.
Yeah, and so we try to really be true to why and how long. And so we have a series that we're in production on that's 5 episodes, and it's based on a book. And that was part of how we decided. It's kind of the chapters in a lot of ways. And we knew that it would sustain 5 hours, and that it wouldn't be something that should be 8. We're doing another one that we can't decide if it should be 4, 5, or 6, and we're trying to kind of figure that out with the buyers so that we will know that we have enough material that'll keep it so that that you're going to dig deeper and deeper each time and find something new each time that's going to keep the audience really interested. And I think that's just so essential.
From the filmmaking side of it, you're creating basically 4 feature films at once. So it's like that means your ratio of filming is triple or quadruple. And when you think like, oh, we'll make this into a series, the reality is you actually need a ton more time and people and stamina and delivery schedules all vary. But if you're delivering 8 hours, that's 8 feature films, and you need to kind of go into it with that mindset. Like, can you do that? Like, can you really sustain that? Because this was the first for me, and I was flat out exhausted by the end. Like, wow, we just did this all in, in a month.
Doing everything at once. At
You're
some
doing
point.
everything at once. Yeah.
What will happen at the networks if you do choose to pitch a series too, I think it's important to know, is that you can have a great reel. Like, I would say all of these are incredible reels. I feel like I'm in bad company, even like their reels are so amazing and so emotional, and so gripping and thrilling, and you feel the tension. And, you know, in probably even 4 or 5 years ago, you can sell off of that reel. And what our company is finding now more and more, and I'm curious to know if the two of you had this in your process, is that, okay, so it's a series, we see that, but we need to understand what is the first hour, what is the second hour. And so to take off of what you're saying, you kind of have to have 4 treatments if you're 4 hours. You really have to be able and do this for yourself before you decide how to format it out and pitch it. Like, what is happening in the first hour, and how does that connect in such a way to the second? What's different about the second? I mean, I can only imagine chronological was the only organizing principle you I would have gone crazy thinking of another way to find, format that out.
We tried.
Yeah, I can't imagine. But I mean, you have to be able to, we had a series we were taking out, and with really big auspices, like well-known creators that were turning to the nonfiction area, and they're great. One of them was an incredible writer and had written massively commercial scripted series. But to sell it, they had to literally write out what ended up being like a 12-page, one space like document of each hour and the depths and the turns and paragraphs that you were almost feeling like you were watching something. Yeah. So that's the level of preparation that I think for series it's important to be able to at least be prepared for.
To take in.
I just want to say, when we pitched this, it was 3 pages and a 3-minute reel. And between the time of pitching this and now, where people are coming to me about new series, I'm getting 60 pages of material for like a 7-hour episode or a 7-hour series, and maybe sometimes like 30 minutes of footage, like both raw interviews and it's a different world. It's a thesis.
Is it like creating a proof of concept to really sell it, or even a pilot?
Yeah, or it's just making sure that each episode is as jam-packed full of great material as possible. It doesn't mean that that's what it's going to be. It's just written, but to the extent of what you're talking about, I've seen now in the last 2 weeks, I've seen 3 of these, which is like massive work that goes into the deck and the pitch before even being considered.
It's kind of akin to the Bible, when in scripted series, what you have to do is write a pilot and then a Bible for the whole arc of the series. Like, it's, the days of sort of selling it in the room off of like a 30-minute meeting where it's kind of like this, it doesn't really, there's so much high quality content on all these platforms. They're so mature that to pull the audience away and to really devote the space and the resources, they have to really understand what they're taking a financial risk on, competing in the ecosystem, because it's such high quality.
Yeah, and it's so competitive. So, Julie.
And that kind of gets into, development, because a lot of times what happens is you go to pitch and what comes back to you is, well, let's do a development period. I hate development periods.
Development periods are also like, they'll give you 60 days to come up with the pitch, and then they get 60 days to approve it. So by then you've got like, what is it? I can't do the math, but it's like many months have gone by already of just figuring out if you're got something with this company or not. And it's
yeah, and also some of those companies make you negotiate the long form agreement for development deal, which means you're spending a lot on legal and an enormous amount of your own kind of energy and resources to make sure that everything is set out the way you want it to be. And you might not really be ready for that when you at that stage. So that's also can be a little tricky.
You're deleveraging yourself in selling, if you are in different kinds of conversations with different buyers, then one that you really like the idea of being at is a protracted process, because the preparation on the front end maybe was, really great, but not to that Bible level. So I think it just takes a lot more thinking and writing and collaboration in the front end to really make a market and make that process more swift.
Yeah, if you can invest that time, that energy, and call in favors for resources to create as much of that material as possible, you're going to be able to navigate much more successfully on your own terms.
Great. Do we have any questions in the audience? Yes. I think there's a mic. She's coming.
The lights are bright, but there's numbers on the chairs. You can call them out.
B8.
B8.
Exactly. Yes.
So what is the process to pitch to any of you?
I mean, we have a pretty, and it's a pretty informal kind of, you go to info@Motto Pictures and you contact us through that. And for us, a lot of times, and right now is one of those times, we're a small company, so we are, kind of topped out. We're at capacity right now for this next period of time. So it might be, and since a lot of these series are so time sensitive, we'll say that right away. This isn't a time where we can look at new projects. And then, we find projects in a lot of different ways. A lot of times it's relationships that we already have. Other times it's at markets like IFP or, Tribeca All Access or, going to pitch forums. But, sometimes it's just somebody who knows somebody or somebody who kind of sends something in over the transom. It's usually the other ways that I just laid out. But, it has happened that we connect with somebody through an email.
I think there's the great thing to you and the resources for all of you who are wondering that and may have great projects is that there are those sort of pitch forums or lab environments that are both really great creatively for you to sort of cut your teeth with a lot of professional feedback, and also a great filtration process for those of us that just can't listen to every pitch or hear everything. It's difficult, I think, to be ready to come and pitch a producer or a production financier or an agency or anything like that without that same, at least quasi level of development that we talked about getting ready for network. It's sort of like, hey, I kind of have this idea and I really want to talk to you, and it's just not tenable because someone can't see your idea the way you do unless you can articulate it across that kind of set of materials. So that's really inefficient, and I think has a degrading effect on you because it's got to be very discouraging. So I think there are incredible, there's so much of an infrastructure now in forums like this one where you can get that kind of feedback or put your projects into consideration to be put in front of professionals. And I think that we all really appreciate those platforms and those community opportunities because we want to make those environments really smart so that the content that comes to us through them gets better and better, right? So to me, that is not to be dismissed. It's really to be reliant on. And then also, the who you know is, of course, unfortunately, one of the ways that things come as well.
It also, it's practice for what you're going to have to do anyway.
Yeah.
Once you get in the door of HBO or Showtime or wherever, you're going to have to bring those materials with you. So you might as well get them in a place where at least you can go to find your producer. It's just a great way to, also it helps you conceptualize what you want to do.
And gather advocates for your project.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Other questions? Yes.
That's a really good question. It's a tough one because you can kind of read a series from the quality of the pitch deck. So you could see the level of the Humans of New York element, pitch, and you can see the quality of the photography, and you can see, if you just go back to the blog before he made books and all that, you can sense that there's something there, and so you have to flesh that out. If you don't have those skills yourself, there's probably one or two friends away from you that may have someone with, just get a lot of feedback, make very clear. I'm sure there have to be these things online, and sometimes you might be able to access people that can give you examples of good pitch decks. Ask people for examples of good pitch decks. Those projects that you might have examples given to you of might be very, very different from your project. So you have to understand the strengths of your project and what you want to put forward and the voice that you're giving, the words that you're using. There's a voice to every pitch deck that really is like, whose voice is it, and is it comedic, or one of the things to avoid in a pitch deck is saying, and then we will do this. I think that's the death
great
of
advice.
every pitch deck. That is like, don't tell me what you're going to do. If you're taking the time to have me read this, do it in words. And if you do that concisely and sort of a less is more balance with that same stasis, try and find, like, am I communicating enough of my idea to someone who doesn't know my idea? If you have a friend you've been laboring over an idea for 4 years and they've heard so much, but they read the pitch deck, they're going to know things that aren't on the page. So show it to someone who doesn't know and get that kind of feedback.
And also, story is really important. It's so beautiful images only get you so far, but story. How do you conceive of this story? What is it going to be? Beginning, middle, and end. You may not have that filmed, but at least you can use text, you can use cards, you can use photographs, you can use anything. I see so many reels of just great situations and beautiful photography, but I have no idea where it's going or what it's saying, and that is easy to dismiss. Not that I'm a funder or, a distributor, but I still sometimes get, won't do a project because I don't know what it's about.
Yeah, I totally agree. Also, emphasize your assets. If you have particular access, if you have somebody who's a consultant, if that's, a great DP, any of that, you want to really emphasize and make sure that that's really heavily featured. If it's a deck, you want to have a really good fonts that you use. Shitty fonts are a real turnoff. And it sounds crazy, but it's really true.
So true.
What are the shitty fonts?
Times New Roman.
Yeah.
But I mean, work with some, like give it to somebody who you know who's really good graphically. I mean, give it to like somebody who's like just got out of college and they're really smart. I mean, we have people who do decks, in our office are, a year out of college and they're doing great stuff. Our logo, our moving logo, our animated logo was done by, somebody who was like 23 years old. There's amazing talent. Like they just are born with it somehow now. So, utilize that. It's like that kind of you don't have to go to somebody who's going to make you spend $10,000 to do something like that. So, but you take it up, class it up, and make it look good. Have the content really there. Have the reason that you should be the person doing this also present. In some kind of a director's statement in the material somewhere. What is it that drew you to it? What is it that? Why are you the person who should do it? Why is this thing that you are driven to do? All of those things that are really key, but essentially they have to see. Whoever's going to be looking at this should be able to see this, how it will unfold, why it is special, why it's important, why now.
And use your best material. Use it. Even if you feel like it's not making sense, use it. And also show what you plan to show to other people so they can give you feedback if they're in the business or not in the business, but does this make sense?
Julie said something super, super takeaway that answers every question about decks. But no, the font, of course, too. But the why now is crucial right now. There's so much happening in the culture, and I think the social media generation has sort of grown up, and everything is available, and so these episodic series are competing with incredible Instagram accounts and, just beautiful, incredible imagery and thought coming at us in every form from every angle. And so there's a lot of tendency to want to go back and look at, when things were different or where this all started or things like that, where the historical is so relevant now because we can learn so much from it. But if it's not relevant right now for at least 3/4 of a page of a reason that you can articulate, it's going to be very challenging to sort of get past the filtration of what is getting bought. So definitely try and articulate why it's relevant today.
And can you also talk on that point about the uniqueness of a project? There's so much crossover with themes and stories and, and just knowing how to make your project absolutely unique to anything else out there.
Well, it's like, if you're doing something, we have something that's being developed that is, you would think it's about opioids, but it's not really. And so the main thing is to knock that out right away so that somebody's not going to be like, oh my God, I have had so much on this. It's like the same if you're doing true crime. as a series, there's so much of that, but why is, it's always about what makes this special and why are people going to want to watch this in the mass of everything else they can watch, as you just said, Liesl. I mean, it's like, it's what makes it rise above, and you have to explain that. You have to, if you don't know why that is, then that's a problem going in.
Any other questions?
Right behind you. Hi.
Yes. Oh,
Because of the nature of series, it seems to me that distributors get involved earlier in the process than if it were a feature. So I guess I'm curious how that, in your experience, has impacted the creative process, the balance of creative control, and then sort of when you're pitching, how can you make sure you're starting to steer the boat in the right direction instead of looking for a big deal that then kind of takes it away from you?
That's a lot of questions
Bump.
in one. I'm just going to say that because I'm now very afraid of answering you. But I think if you're saying the front part of that was about like when to sort of collaborate with the buyers and think about, I think watch a lot of what's on these different networks because they're all so very distinct. And what Amazon is looking for, it's very different from what Hulu wants. It's very different from HBO. It's very different from Showtime. When I watched your Sizzle, Jenny, I'm like, that belongs on Showtime. They've got so much cutting-edge political content, a really bold brand. If you think about, what ends up on Netflix, there's a greater breadth of content, and they may not have as much of their originals that kind of look and feel certain ways. So you have to kind of know a little bit who you're aiming for. And chances are when you're pitching, it used to be like 8 networks are interested, and now it's like very fast, that's not for us, with really, really high quality stuff, and a handful of networks that it's much more relevant to. So I do think there is a moment to find where you're still nimble enough to work with a partner to iterate on something and really make it right for them. But there are things that people fully finance. I mean, we sold a fully financed 10-hour series at Sundance called America to Me, made by Steve James. That participant financed like a film. They financed 10 hours of production before they showed anything to buyers. So there are some unique, moments of, or examples of that kind of thing happening. But I think it's far better to, the one thing that's true is that you have to have, what Jenny was saying, 30 minutes. Sometimes you have a lot more material that you're showing. A 2 to 3 minute reel, which we showed in here in many cases, is often no longer enough to really sell. You might start with that, but the deepening process might be, well, we also have this, and we also have this. And so my recommendation would be to be ready to be more out over your skis with the story, but you might not have time in a pitch to start with how over your skis you're prepared to talk about. And then know how you might pitch differently, kind of what the strengths are to each place. You might have had 3 other parts of your question I didn't get to.
Yeah, I mean, I think you also were asking, how do you work with, creatively? How is it to work with I think it's also part of your job to do that research and see, if you see, contact Jenny. How was it to work with Showtime?
Hey, Julie. Motto. Julie at Motto.
But it's
info at Motto.
Info at Motto. No, but it's all, you'll meet people here at these forums. You meet people at all of these different events that take place. We're in New York. It's like an easily resourced place. If you're concerned that creative relationship is going to be, and if you've never done a series before, there will be a certain amount of creative handling that will happen from that end. There are, the kind of wonderful elite of the Showtimes and the HBOs still that you can work with creatively that are going to be a special, really interesting collaboration. There are others that are going to be, there's so many opportunities opening. And again, it's like the new people, like when we worked with Facebook, or there's Apple, or there's YouTube. It's not called Red anymore. What's it called? YouTube Prime.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Watch.
Watch?
Watch. Originals. Prime original. I don't know.
Whatever YouTube is doing that stuff, and there's, all of these new players that are coming out, and they may not be used to collaborating in the same way. They may be coming from a more, like having somebody from a basic cable channel who has never really done anything like this and is used to doing something in a system. So, it's kind of up to you in a lot of ways to do as much research as you can, but ultimately, it is a buyer's market for series. It's wonderful when participant did Steve's series. That's amazing. It's rare. So since that's an outlier, you have to be ready to, it's your first. If it's your first series and you're not, Steve James, you're going to have to be ready to make a lot of compromises. So do that with your eyes open, and once you make that series, if that series goes well, then you'll have more power and more leverage going forward.
To that point, it's also important to pitch to the place who makes the content that you respond to. Like, if you don't like the material on Hulu, don't pitch to Hulu, because chances are their feedback is going to be a certain way. I'm not singling out Hulu. I've never worked with Hulu.
TLC, use that as an example.
Well, TLC. I don't know anyone at Hulu, but I guess I'm just saying, like, go to the places that you enjoy watching their content, and that's likely going to be the right fit. I mean, feel like if you're responding to it in one way, typically
That's great.
that's your
Places
instinct.
that sing to you. We have only time for one more question, and we want to.
I was wondering if you could talk to the optimal target zone for the length of the pitch materials. Most of what I heard today is familiar about staying nice and short, but then Jenny was talking a lot about really expanding and talking about 30-minute stuff, so I was wondering if you guys could talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's
In my very limited experience between we pitched this in 2016 and just finished it. So now that I'm seeing new projects that are coming up and being pitched right now, the material I've seen ranges between 30 pages to 60 pages for a series deck, and I would say the sizzle reels are ranging like 8 to 20 minutes and before development, and then once development starts, maybe 2 hours of material, raw interviews or raw. That's like literally based on a 2-week experience I've just had, where I'm hearing the same thing over and over. But maybe you've had different
those
experiences.
2 hours be scene selects and kind of.
Yeah. Like, what else is there? What's the best material you have so far?
I mean, I think it also depends if you have relationships with those
Right. If you're
networks, then I think you can provide less.
Right.
But I think if it's a real proof of concept, then there is an expectation of greater amount of material and understanding that you can share.
I mean, I would say, 3 minutes, while having a 3-minute version, like I said, the reason I said, well, having a 3-minute version might be good, just because like what we did with our short version is we used it as a teaser to get in advance of the meeting so that people would, and you don't have to do that. You can use the deck or you can use a short 2-pager. I would never recommend giving all your materials to say, here's all my materials, I'd love to meet with you. I would recommend saying, here's a little bit about my project. I'd really like to meet with you to share more, I have more. And then deepening in that meeting. And so if you use that process inside the room, I just sort of love the 8-minute thing is something that is, like all of my WME colleagues who sell non-scripted shows all day long, it's too long, it's too long. I'm like, you're not getting it. This is documentary. It's like, it's more deep. Everybody needs to have more material. I don't want to be sent back with, not having the right amount of material. If it's a little bit longer than that, that's fine. I had one reel where it was 12 minutes. And I think in a room, 20 minutes is too long, but if you're following up with getting someone more material to review, it's probably not. And my decks are, when we pitch to networks, are very rarely as long as 30 pages, but again, you might have like a 8 to 10 page deck and then episode breakdown, and the episode breakdown is much longer, and that just depends on what you have to share.
Great, all great advice, and I think we have to close. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Apologies for my voice.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Yes,
Thanks, Sarah.
so How to American, will stay tuned. It will be somewhere very soon. The Fourth Estate is on Showtime, and Humans of New York is still on Facebook. Thank you so much, Julie, Jenny, Liesl.
Thanks, Cynthia.